All right, what's going on, everybody? Happy Thanksgiving. What is going on, guys? It is Tom Radigan. And for today's Thanksgiving, I wanted to do a video about, you know, pop culture that relates to Thanksgiving. And one thing that you can think of course, is the Macy's Thanksgiving Parade. Some people do the dog show that comes out right after it. Some people even like to go back to the past, and sometimes people want to watch like their holiday day shows. That are going to be because everybody feels it's Thanksgiving. Now we can start talking about Christmas, and some people, like I say, go back into the past. And like for instance, today my parents were talking about the Arlo Guthrie song Alice's Restaurant, which came out in the 60s, which is an 18-minute song, which is about Thanksgiving. However, we are going to be talking about the band's The Last Waltz. Now, I've talked about the band before, and you probably already know that I am a fan of the band. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Yes, I am a fan of the band. But they have a very special, important part to do with Thanksgiving, and that is their last concert, The Last Waltz, was done on Thanksgiving Day. It's November 24th. However, they did it on November 25th on a Thursday in 1976. And that's a movie that I love that was directed by Martin Scorsese and relates so well to it, to the holiday. I mean, it really does. And I felt that there was no other way to really talk about anything to do with pop culture and Thanksgiving than to talk about the band's The Last Waltz. Like I've said, I've talked about the band before on my channel, so you already know I'm a fan. But I really got into them 2 years ago during the pandemic. I think I've already kind of said that before, but just a little preamble before we go on, because I gotta have my preambles. You gotta let me do that, please. Please. But yeah, no. So that yeah, no. So I got into them like 2 years ago, and that's when I've always heard about the film The Last Waltz, and I decided to finally watch it because I'm a huge Martin Scorsese fan already, and it was just such an interesting film. And also too, Robbie Robertson from the band has partnered with Scorsese as time went on, and did other projects like and he's helped him on the music score of Raging Bulls along with Garth Hudson helped with that, but he also helped him with like the King of Comedy, and then of course fast forward to years later, even like with The Irishman recently, contributing to the soundtrack of that, and even The Wolf of Wall Street. So, yes, Scorsese, and Robbie Robertson have been like kind of this power team. But yeah, and you kind of really first see it here in The Last Waltz. Now, when it comes to this film, I mean, it is a really the real most important thing to really capture from it is what an experience this one. It's a concert film, and it's a doc, and then it's a music documentary, rockumentary, but it's really a concert film, and you really get a chance to see, the impact that rock music has on audiences, and that's what that does. And an interesting, take on this type of film that's different than some concert films in the past is it really just focuses on the band on stage. It doesn't focus on the audience at all. There's no close-up shots at all throughout the movie of the audience, because Scorsese felt like we've seen that already, and the project was to really, like the whole purpose of the piece was to focus on how the musicians relate to each other on stage. And that's the thing, when it comes to these types of movies, documentary, there's no dialogue, but when you see it on like them playing on stage together, you can see this connection that they have without even talking. It's this type of, they're able to look at each other and are able to have this process that gets through a specific song. And I mean, these guys were professionals because they played together since they were teenagers, and played, like they say in the movie, they've been together for 16 years, and that was in, and the concert was done in 76. The film came out in 78. But yeah, like, as a film, of course, for a documentary, it works, but for somebody who's like a music fan and a band fan, you kind of want more, to tell you the truth. And you sometimes when you look at this in almost like, as a music fan, you don't think of it as a movie or appreciate it as cinema. But that sometimes can be how if you're a diehard Star Wars fan and just love the universe, you sometimes don't think of it as like a film or look at it in a cinema standpoint. But yeah, and I think that's how it could be with music when movies are about yeah, when there are some movies about music, and that's kind of how I feel. This film is that like there's a lot that you would want to see that isn't there, and the criticisms I think that I've realized people have, and I see it kind of myself too that. A lot of people feel, you really can tell, like, of course, in a film, there is a main character, and, and it's usually a movie is done in the point of a view of one character. And that goes to the same for documentaries. In this case, it's a group of about five guys, the main, character or the person whose point of view is it throughout the whole film is Robbie Robertson. And the criticism that, was taken from it was that, like, he's in basically most of the whole film when the other members are only in like a fraction of it, he's in it throughout the whole film. And I mean, I think the thing too is that, it's very clear to see that if you don't know who the leader of the group is, that he was the leader in some ways. But it also works that all these guys were so talented that it's not like he was doing everything. Yes, he was the songwriter, but he wasn't the lead singer. That was Lee Von Helm, Richard Manuel, Rick Danko, and Garth Hudson was the other instrumentalist that really contributed so much to the group. But Robbie Robertson was a really good showman in some ways, even though like I said, he didn't sing. He was good at being like a band leader, and you kind of see that in this film. And even like how he talks, to Scorsese, he's very smooth with his storytelling, kind of even just as like you can tell like when he tells his stories, you see why he's a good songwriter, or you like kind of like see like his specific, kind of mindset of how he goes into like a process of writing, even through his conversations. He tells stuff in a song style way or in a story style way, and yeah, no, it's really, I mean, like it is enjoyable to me. And listen, I don't, you don't know these people as as actual people that you meet down the street, or like talk to or bump into, or just have a cup of coffee with. But you can think that like you like their music. So it's like, I don't know if Robbie Robertson's an asshole in real life, but throughout, he made some great songs. And I think, honestly, he doesn't seem unlikable, but of course everybody's got greed. And some people claim, because like, some people feel he ripped off the other members because he took all the songwriting credit because, his name's on all the songs that they wrote. However, there were other people that were involved with it. The other guys in the band were involved in it too. But but the argument is that they did more of the arranging, and he was, so he didn't really do anything wrong by it's not like he ripped them off. However, he always claims that we were all brothers and this was a team effort. So then it's like, give them a piece of the pie too, but so some people feel like he cashed out that way and greedily took more money, you know than the others for that reason. But I mean, like, listen, there's always going to be conflicts in a band, and especially a band that's been together for years and years and years, and what a concert it is. The saddest thing is they never played together again after this. They never got back together. The whole plan was they were just going to stop performing, but still maybe do stuff in the studio and all that. But as Robbie Robertson claims, like, nobody came back. However, nobody came back to him. The four guys, like Levon, Rick, Danko, Richard Manuel, Garth Hudson, they did all get back together just without Robbie Robertson. But they weren't really recording, they were just going out on the road. And Robbie Robertson really kind of wanted to do more in the studio, I think. He wasn't as much into performing, and he hasn't really performed since. I mean, I think the Last Waltz was really like his last type of performance of himself. He never like, even as a solo artist, I don't know if he ever really went on tour or anything. I mean, he performed on some like talk shows like David Letterman and stuff like that. And he's been on The View, but not really like by him, like not really. I think like having like a whole like live audience or like a tour or like pack the venue with just hit himself, But let's talk about the movie now. So like, what's so great about it too is like with each performance, like I said, this is not like your regular type of movie because it's a documentary, but well, it's a rockumentary and a concert film, and I feel like the conversations in between the songs of the performance are great too. I even like the beginning. This film should be played loud. That's a perfect type of exam, like it just explains, like what you're gonna see in this film, or like what you're gonna expect to, like watch and really, no. So it's really really cool, you know, and I love that, this film should be played really loud, and then you see a shot of all of them playing pool and all that, and and they're playing a game called Cutthroat. So like that's the funny thing too when you think about it, that like everybody's talking about like like, oh, like Robbie Robertson like takes up the whole film when the first member you actually see talk is Rick Danko, actually. So that's kind of the thing I always find funny, and I think that is actually such a classic intro too, for any kind of rock movie now, where they're just playing like where they're on a pool table and they're playing a game called Cutthroat, and Scorsese asks, "So Rick, what's the point of this game?" He's like, "Cutthroat," and he goes, like, "The object is to knock everybody else's balls off and keep yours on the table." Yeah, I'm paraphrasing there, and then he makes the shots, and you hear the audience like in the background, like like as like an overdub, and then they goes to that performance, and then you see like like the audience there, and then they're all coming out, and then you realize that it starts off with their first song, with the first song in the film was the last song they played, ever. Because, like I said, they never played together live after that, all five of them. And the last song they played was actually a cover, and that was Marvin Gaye's "Don't Do It," which was like a cover that they did a lot in live performances. They did it in the on the Rock of Ages live album, which is their most well-known live album that they did. I think actually their only live, well, at least their only live album they did, that was released when they were together, in their prime. But yeah, no, great. Yeah, no, no, no. I love that intro. It's just it works so well for me because it's like, it's just like when you see it, it's like it really is just like a hell of a performance. I mean, like the way they start in with the count off, and even too, like before, like Robbie's like, "Oh, you still there? We're gonna just do one more song." And then Rick Danko goes into the mic, goes like, "Happy Thanksgiving," and then they just go in like, yeah, with the countdown, like the bum, 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 and yeah, and then like you hear the guitar, but like the bum 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 bum, bum, and then yeah, it's just the counting, and then Manuel's pianos being played and all that, and then the horn section goes into it, and then yeah, no, and then the credits of their names pop up, and then so you see like Robbie's name, Rick Danko's, Richard Manuel, Levon, Garth Hudson, and it's just so cool too because like it's just like you really like are shaking your head, and it's like you really are like, oh yeah, this is great, man. This really is. No, I mean it, and it's just like like I love like the song too, and I wish like you can hear the whole song instead of just because they play like I think the third verse and the first verse, I think, and like I love. No, like I just love that, like it too, and like how like even though Levon and Rick are singing, and like I love their harmonies on it, and like even like Robbie just like wailing away on the guitar, Garth Hudson having his hair all messed up, going nuts on the organ, and then you just see Richard Manuel kind of just straight, just playing the piano, or just like playing it like like a committed soldier in battle. Really, I mean that's really like what it seems like. These guys, they are in a trance. They are doing their type of duty. They are doing their job. It's like when you see them perform, it's like nothing else matters, and that goes throughout the type of performances you see. And then, of course, they started off their performance, which I think with oh my god, sorry, Jesus Christ, that was a word bubble, word salad there. Yeah, all right. Word salad special for Thanksgiving. That was our sponsor. All right. Never mind. Okay. See, I always make an effort to correct any mistakes. Just remember that, people. Remember that. But anyway, now, so when we go to like, for instance, like the first performance, which is like I think, yeah, up on Cripple Creek. Oh my god, too. And then like how you see the stage, which was Winterland. And the reason why it was Winterland, it was, the first time they played together as the band. So they ended it that way. And it was with Bill Graham, who was a well-known music promoter who worked with the Dead, and like, all big acts at that time. And yeah, no, so but how you even like see a dark stage and you hear some voices like good evening, and then they just go into the intro of up on Cripple Creek, and then the stage lights up like kind of slowly on one of the members and then the other member and then all five of them. And it's this big ass stage, however only five guys are playing. That's the thing that's so cool, is like that, like on a big stage and hearing such this interesting type of sound that's in your face, like a real wall of sound. And just seeing, like, hearing that, and it's just coming from these five guys on this mega stage. And then of course throughout, they had a horn section that played on some songs too. But them, like, just playing that song, which was well-known song on their second album. And yeah, like the harmonies, like, and I love like to the end where Levon like goes like, well, you sure wish I could, you're like it, like, goes, oh my god, Levon, like what a hell of a showman too. And also too, like, just of like, even how they get off the stage at certain performances, like even in the beginning of Don't Do It, you know, and that's a real interesting one because that was the end, and like Robbie Robertson says, like, thank you and good night. And I some YouTube comment actually I think captures the whole type of mood, or aftermath of that performance, of or even like the reality that they were probably going through, like, he's, Robbie Roberts is like, thank you, good night, grabs his beer, puts on his hat, and waves goodbye to the audience. And and that was that, and that was it. Like that was the last song, they ever played together, like I said. And it's crazy because that was a cover, and they had a lot of well-known original songs that they did. So that was kind of cool, to really kind of see that, I think really play a big effect. And I think that's what's really cool. And then they have a discussion, Robbie Robertson has discussions with Martin Scorsese throughout the film. And then like I like the transitions in the beginning with the conversations from up on Cripple Creek to like Robbie Robertson, Richard Manuel, and Rick Danko, where they tell the story of when they played at this place called the Skyline Lounge, which was this like just like uh dive type of bar, that was like, yeah, it was a joint in Fort Worth, Texas. And there was like nobody really in the crowd. And however, there's these two couples, and and a fight starts with just the both of them. And it's this real like, and they called this guy on round, and they called it that because the roof was really like the actual sky, there was barely a roof. Yeah, so that's why they called it really the Skyline Lounge. And they found out actually like years later that the club belonged to Jack Ruby, which is what they say, which is I love that too, how they say that like very like just gradually, and like they just say it very slowly, and they kind of give more of a big suspense, like especially like when you know who Jack Ruby is. And it's just like once you see that, you're like, oh. And then it just transitions to the shape I'm in. And like that just works so well with the intro of that, because the intro is like, on the record it's not so like moody, but in on the live version it's like really like a little moody at first, and you're trying to figure out like what's the song, the way Robbie Robertson does his guitar, and he just really goes at it. And then you see Richard Manuel just take the leads, like swinging back and forth, playing the piano. And yeah, that was my first time hearing the band song The Shape I'm In. Oh, it was actually the first time I heard a lot of their actual music, because I watched that first before I became a real band fan. And then once I watched it again, then I started knowing the songs and all that. And like throughout this year I like really like watched it like on and off. Like when I was up at Oswego, I basically when I was in my room, anytime I had free time, I actually would watch it. And honestly, to tell you the truth, it's like you always miss the little things, and that will probably be like one of the little things I miss of watching the Last Waltz in my room. Just because it was just like so fun, and like even talking to my friends about who are also diehard music fans, and even making fun of me for loving that movie and their music so much because I really did just like, and I think it's like we get into something when there is like maybe it doesn't always have to be tragic, but where there's something important happening in our life or a coming of age, we kind of remember the things that we were interested in on the side as entertainment or what we're interested in, and they kind of define us as people. And we can always change our type of wants and inspirations and what we're looking at that moment, but when we are into it, we really can sometimes be into something. And I think that's the thing too, like I love this music so much, or I love the type of feeling it had on me and the effect. And of course, it's older music and not something that's relevant as much that people talk about. I mean, people, when they're talking about new stuff for Thanksgiving, barely a lot of people are probably mentioned in the Last Waltz. Um, because it's like more of like I think a cult type of thing at this point, people who are into that stuff. Like when I was with my girlfriend, like I said, we saw a performance of a tribute band doing the band, and they did a lot of songs from the Last Waltz, and you could tell that there were people in that audience that were fans of that movie because they had the Last Waltz shirts. People even in the concert, like in the in the auditorium, were talking about scenes from the Last Waltz, and even like singing some of the band songs, but let's talk a little bit more about like the performances and the performances with the guests they had. And oh my god, the billing they had on this show. You had Ronnie Hawkins, who they started with, and they do a cool version of Who Do You Love. They got let's see, Neil Diamond, um, Joni Mitchell, Neil Young, Bobby Charles, who you don't see in the film, but he's on the album. Paul Butterfield, Muddy Waters, Eric Clapton, Bob Dylan, Ronnie Wood, Ringo Starr, and am I forgetting anybody? Or Paul Butterfield. I think did I mention Paul Butterfield. Oh, and Dr. John too. The Dr. John performance is probably one of my favorites. And that's probably a big highlight. Like my favorite performances probably throughout the film would have to be them doing Such a Night with Dr. John. And especially I love his intro when he's like when Robbie Robertson's like, "Oh no, the doctor, Dr. John, Dr. Mac Reminack." Which was his name, Mac Reminack. And then he's like, "Come on, Mac," and he goes like, "Thanks for the band and all the fellas." And then they go 2, 3, 4, and then he just go into Such a Night, which is a big hit from Dr. John. And they just do it so well with the backing vocals from Rick Danko, Levon Helm, and it looks like Robbie Robertson is singing. But an interesting fact is, even though you see Robbie Robertson singing, his mic was muted because apparently back then it was known that he was not a good singer. So what apparently they would do is they would just mute his mic, and it was all for show, really. I mean, there are some people I know who are like not a huge fan of Robbie Robertson because of some of the things I've mentioned about how some people feel like he did the other band dirty by like just having his name on the songs, and that he has a big ego by basically talking throughout the film and really being like the main guy throughout it. And even the way he talks, I think in some ways it's not like a gloating thing, but just you can tell this guy really loves being in front of the spotlight. And he has like a natural kind of charisma for it when you see the interviews in between really too, and like I mean that's the thing too, but the Dr. John performance is great. Them doing their song The Wait in the MGM studio because it was produced by MGM, and they were doing it before the actual concert, but they do a version of The Wait with the Staples Singers, and that Oh my god. I remember no, like, I remember when I saw that, like, I already saw the movie, but I was one day, like, just, like, and this was during the pandemic, like, the heat of the pandemic, and this was already, like, kind of, like, a year in, but still, things were still pretty bad, and people were just getting their vaccine and all that, and, I remember I was just, like, needing something to make me smile, and I wasn't doing this on purpose, however, I just came across the band's The Wait, and once put it on, like, this smile just came on my face, seeing them perform it. And like the way like I've always loved the intro in the studio version, with the bam, 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 bam. But the way they do it in the film, where it's just like it's, oh my god, like it's just like it's even better than the studio version. Like how they like kind of slow down the beats and and just go right into it, and then you see Richard Manuel, Rick Danko, Levon Helm starting to sing the original, the first verse, and then like after they sing the chorus, you see Robbie Robertson give the head and like nod to the Staples Centers, and then Mavis Staple takes the lead, and oh my god, the she knocked the hell out of it. And then you got Papa Staple, doing the Luke verse, like, "Hey Luke, my friend." Like, the way he sings it too, like it's such a very like, like kind of, like a higher type of pitch, like, he wasn't like, he was older at the time, but he's singing it in kind of a begging way, or a way that like an old person begs in such like, emotion, deep, deep emotion, and it's this real like connection you have throughout the song, and it really does, like once the intro, like once you see too, like of like in, but like I say, like also too, one thing to note is that the conversations between the performances work so well together. Oh my god, I just love how they work throughout like throughout the film, how you see them discussing stuff with Martin Scorsese, and then it goes right to a performance, and they do it at specific times, and good times too, like for instance, like before they do the Wade and all that, you got Richard Manuel saying, which I think is a great way to start it off too, where they're talking about how they got their name, and of course, like if you're a band fan, you would know like how of course, like they were with Ronnie Hawkins and they were the Hawks, and they kind of like briefly talk about it, how like Richard Mann's like, well, we were the Hawks, and then like that changed, like once they were with Bob Dylan, people started calling them the band, so it was like everybody kind of called them the band and all that, and that kind of just stuck. And so like Richard Manning was saying, so we just decided to call ourselves the band. And then like you just see this like smile on his face, and then like he just laugh, and then like it just goes right into them doing the Wait. And what ends it in such a beautiful way is Mavis Staples saying beautiful. And when you hear her say that, you're like, yeah, no, it really is. Like she's saying like what everybody else is feeling. I mean, even like I've said this line that Richard Manuel said in a documentary or in an interview in the 80s, where he said when they were listening to playback sessions of music from Big Pink, they really noticed this vocal style that they had. And he's, listening to the sessions, and he's like realizing like, wow, I really like this stuff. Like I don't have anything to compare it to. I really like it, and I hope everybody else does. And I think that's another kind of comment that really kind of emulates what the band's impact was to the world of music and what they were adding. It was a mix of these guys who were talented musicians but also could harmonize together too, and you really feel this type of unison type of thing, nobody overshadowing each other. You don't, like with bands, there are tension and all that. Even though this is the last performance, they all seem like, and they claim it's the last performance, but they all seem like they love each other throughout the film. They're just so happy throughout it. And another favorite performance of mine is them performing with Neil Young, "Helpless," and Joni Mitchell in the back, like doing vocals as well, doing backup vocals, and like them, just singing with Robbie Robertson, Rick Danko, just singing along with Neil Young, well Robbie Robertson lip syncing, but it's just so cool how they sing that. I just love that too. And what's great too is how Robbie Robertson's like, you all know this guy, and you really see like how Neil Young, because even though Neil Young was like, oh, sorry. Sorry about that. But it was like when you see like, even when you see like Neil Young, for instance, one of the biggest stars at the time. I mean, still one of the biggest rockers out there. And Robbie Robertson's like, you all know who this guy is. And when Neil Young comes out, you see this kind of like, real type of, humanity, if that's the right word, or just this real type of, real emotional connection he has with Robertson in that moment, where he's like saying like, thank you for, letting me do this. And Robbie Robertson's like saying he kind of looks surprised, like, oh shit, like, are you kidding? Like, like really like that, like he's the biggest, like one of the biggest stars, and they're thankful that he's on with them, and like, so like, and it's a big honor for them, but it's a big honor for him too, and he says that too. And I think I just love that, where he goes like, it's just such a like a cool scene, like where he says like, I just like to say it's a real one of my pleasure, the pleasures of my life, to be on the stage with these gentlemen right here. And then how they're tuning and all that, and you see Robbie Robertson going into a different state of mind, and Neil Young just like playing with the harmonica, tuning in, and he goes like, they got it now, Robbie. And you see like Robbie kind of like worried, or just like, you really see like he's running the show. He just wants to make sure everything goes smoothly. And then the harmonica just goes right into it. And then they do the song, and they just bring such a beautiful rendition of this. And to tell you the truth, I think I like this performance better than the actual the Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young version on Deja Vu. Actually, to tell you the truth, like it's just it works so well. Each verse, the chorus. I mean, Joni Mitchell's, contributions to it. It works to the point where, even though it's a live performance, you kind of can see the band doing this, like, or like a popular kind of request for people when they're listening to the band, of them doing that song with Neil Young. And then of course their own performances are great too. I mean, of course, of them doing it makes no difference, with Garth Hudson, having his sax solo, even how they do the intro. Like the intro is more powerful than the studio version of it. And the harmonies, but like when you see Garth Hudson doing that saxophone solo, just like, really, it is such a beautiful song already. But when you hear the sax solo, it's like it brings like more levels to it, and brings like, it opens up more layers of this real type of connection, and deep like kind of emotions of just like, whether it's love, excitement. And then like once it's over, you just see Garth Hudson like smile, and he's like not that much for words. Like you barely see him throughout the film. He only has like this kind of like one weird, not weird, but it's just like this type of thing about where he talks about jazz and all that. And honestly, that's the thing. The one problem I have with the film is the jump cuts. There's a lot of cuts in between the interviews and all that. And sometimes even with Garth Hudson, when he talks about, where there's the one where he's talking about jazz music and like the Priests on 52nd Street, like it kind of almost seems like that was all three different conversations, the way the jump cuts are and all that, and like, and it kind of seems like, they're like putting one conversation, they're mixing up, three different conversations and putting it to one. I don't know. I don't think that's what it is. But also too, I know that that came out this year was the Criterion version, which I think had more of like an extended like kind of director's cut, or just more info about it. And honestly, I would love to get my hands on it, or see more than what was actually in the film, too, but yeah, no. But I think like another thing I want to mention while I'm talking about the conversations is, like I said, they do such a great job at having specific interview moments go with like the performance. Like for instance, when they're talking about like this is a kind of random scene where there are like women on the road, and it's not like too raunchy, but they're just talking about how they like women on the road, which like what guy group wouldn't, and all that. And it's just like it's a bonus, to love what you do at your job is great, but to even have other people love what you do, and it brings more kind of perks and pluses to your love life. I mean, hey, that's just and you dig it, but you know I mean, I think that's the thing too about it, and like but like that's just such. Oh, that's probably the most random scene throughout it. But then after them talking about women on the road and that scene, they go to the Joni Mitchell performance of them doing Coyote, which is another great performance. And then like for instance, well yeah, then of course another like kind of raunchy, like yeah, it's rated R, and you can see why it's rated R, even though the rating systems were different back then. But there's this one scene where Robertson is talking about Ronnie Hawkins, and yeah, he's talking about him before Ronnie Hawkins comes on, and he says that when he met him, Hawkins offered him a job, and he says like, sure, like a job, but what is it paying? He goes like well, and like you ain't gonna, yeah. Well, he says, well, son, you ain't gonna make much, but you guarantee, but you'll get more pussy than Frank Sinatra. Yeah, and that's like the funniest thing is of that, because that just shows you kind of like what the fantasy life of rock and roll was at that time, or like that was paradise, for like a young kid probably to hear, of them playing rock, and that's like all they needed, I think was that, and I think just like this kind of real type of introduction, even almost to adulthood, is like seeing the world of rock and performers and that real fantasy life, just wanting that fun spotlight. And you really see this as like kind of a film too that really captures rock and the all the accessories around it, which you see, of course, sometimes not always good, which is smoking, alcohol. And it is weird to see that because, like Levon Helm had real problems with his throat years later, had throat surgery. They all had a lot of, drug problems, like Richard Manuel, Rick Danko, Levon Helm. You see them all smoking throughout the film, drinking. And in some ways it is more of like a guy movie because there isn't a lot of women. So that's why it's interesting when they have that scene of women on the road. Um, you know, but yeah, even other scenes, like I say, like relate to each performance. Like for instance, when they talk about songwriters and Tim Panally, then they go to Neil Diamond because they mentioned his name, but Neil Diamond was one of those performers that was known to be a songwriter because that's how he really started out. And yeah, like when you think of like the singer songwriter type of era, Neil Diamond is one of those people, along with Joni Mitchell, who's also there. And then you've got yeah, like them talking about Memphis and people who are from there, and like all the types of other genres that connect with rock and roll, and then they do the performance with Muddy Waters. Then they talk about, for instance, Sonny Boy Williamson when they met. The Sonny Boy Williamson, the second one, because there was two Sonny Boy Williamson. But then again, then it transitions to them doing the blues on Mystery Train, which some people know by Elvis, because Elvis did that on Sun Records. But yeah, no. So that, but also too, another thing to really mention would have to would which I would probably say would have to be you know yeah, well, of course I'm doing Mystery Train, which is a great performance. But yeah, like another performance I would say that like is just as good is, well, yeah, the Muddy Waters, but them doing Further on the Road with Eric Clapton. It's just, oh my god, I just loved it. Uh, you, you know, um, like, and that when you see them perform, like, oh my god, like they are really in this type of trance. They really are. They just go right into it, and like they just go into this real jam of, yeah, it was a Bobby Bland song. Yeah, it's a 50s song, and like the way they just go all into it, like they're just like, they're just banging it out, and like Clapton playing with them, it's like he's like a hell of a sixth member, and it's like, God, wouldn't it have been great to see what they could have done with Eric Clapton if they did an album together? Because Clapton actually did want to be a part of the band. He actually mentions that when he inducted, because he actually was the one that inducted the band in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, part of the band. He actually mentions that when he inducted, because he actually was the one that inducted the band in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and he talks about how when he was leaving Cream, this was a new thing that was coming on, and he listened to the record and it became this drug. And honestly, that's really a good way to describe this music. Was it became a drug for me too. I mean, the Last Waltz became a drug, and it was thus this real addiction of seeing these guys really can put this type of connection into music, and he loved their brotherhood, and he wanted to be a part of their band to see if they needed another guitarist. Robert Robinson claims that he never knew that until they inducted him in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and he goes like, "Oh, so that's what you meant when you wanted, when you asked if we had another guitarist, or if you had, yeah, like, or if you needed a rhythm guitarist." Because that's the funny thing about it. I think. But oh my God. Yeah, no. That yeah, that scene too. Because what's really funny about that is Clapton's strap falls off, and you see the guitar harmony between him and Robbie Robertson, because Clapton's doing the solo and he's their guest, and the strap falls off, and so it's like, show must go on. So, Robbie Robertson takes in, and oh my God, he's just like, playing his heart out, and just like, like, I love that. And honestly, too, when I was up at school, or even now, when I go for a jog, I sometimes start with that song. And once like Robbie Robertson's guitar solo comes in, I run even faster, because it's just such a really like I just love how he goes into it, and he just plays it this is what, while you see he's like a guitar prodigy, or just such a virtuoso in this type of instrument, and like the way he goes like the and like even me like humming it can't explain like how fast he does it. And then you see, and then you hear Danko's bass just all in there, and even Levon's drums too. They're just all like, throughout it, even though they were a starring band, they also were good at being a backing band. Playing with Clapton and Clapton singing, and that's kind of what shows you what the band was, because they started out as a backing band. However, they became these people in the spotlight, but they also, the documentary kind of focuses on how they didn't feel that they wanted to like have that much publicity too, or like they kind of shied away from that. But it kind of relates that even though they're big performers, and they want to perform their songs to their fans, but they also have these other acts come out and let them do their thing, and they back them because they were known to be a backing band, and they were like, it was kind of both doing what they were known to do, like, let's do kind of what we're both good at, which was being the front, and being the front center of a show, but also just being in the background. And I think you don't see that from any type of group this day, that can have the same power as being in the spotlight, but also a background musician. There's really not that many other artists that can pull that off. Really, but that's really that. And I mean, the way I think we're gonna wrap this the film talking about a few performances. Well, one, the night they drove Dixie down there, song, the way they do that with the horns, it's really, I love that. But what works even more is them playing with Van Morrison, and them doing Caravan. Oh my God. Like, that is what really, and the discussion that they talk about before, like, it's Levon and Robbie, and they're talking with Martin Scorsese. And Levon, like I mentioned in the last video when I talked about the band's album Stage Fright and Hoots, and there's a song on Stage Fright called W.S. Walcott Medicine Show, which was about, yeah, like a traveling like kind of medicine show, like a carnival show type of thing. And that's what, and Levon talks about in the film, like Walcott's Rabbit's Foot Minstrel is what it was called. And I already mentioned the story in the video, so I won't go too much into it, but they were really just talking about that's how, rock, kind of like, the performance aspect of rock came from those types of shows. And so when you see Van Morrison coming in and performing, after that, doing his song Caravan, which is from the Moondance album, like, oh my God, like I just love, how, he's drumming, Levon's drumming along, Robbie's playing the guitar, Richard Manuel on the piano, like, and Van's just singing like he always does and just doing like, a hell of a job. And then at the end, them having the horn section do the la la la's in the studio, which in the studio version it's la 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 la, and Van just sings that. But in the performance, they have the horn section do that, like the ba ba na 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 ba na 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 na. Like I've only heard the studio version of Caravan once, but the live version with the band is like what really gets me too, and just seeing how the audience is reacting when he's doing that, and really like kind of this impact and this type of the real effect he's having on the band of how they're just putting this sound in front of everybody, and like how it just keeps getting louder and louder, like the ba-na-na-na-na. And then like Van's putting his like foot going all over the place, and you see like the close-ups of Levon, how he's just having a good time, Robbie, Rick Danko, and you even see that with the Eric Clapton performance of all of them, kind of a close-ups of them just like like all enjoying each other's company. And yeah, no, and it just works. And then like wow, and then Van leaves, and Robbie goes, and there's Van the Man, and that was like his nickname. And it actually started from the Last Waltz. Actually, that was the first time they had the name Van the Man. And but yeah, no, it's yeah, I love that. Like it's just a and then and na 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 na, and then how he just like keeps like going on, and like doing like that like funky walk, and then the way he makes that exit. No, it gets me every time. And even the performance too that ends after that, which is with Bob Dylan, then doing Forever Young, which was on Planet Waves, which is what the band did with Bob Dylan, and that became a successful album itself. But then them doing the old folk song Baby Let Me Follow You Down, which was on Dylan's first album, and they do it in a rock and roll style, which Dylan was kind of known to do. And that's kind of the controversy Dylan had when he first was playing, and when Electric was, he was playing like the well-known folk songs. However, he was doing them in an electric way, and fans at first were not happy. But of course, they came along and acted like things were, always that way. But probably the way we'll wrap this up is with the last song we see in the film, which is them doing "I Shall Be Released," and it's like them when they have everybody who performed with them together, and they just like what you call it, yeah, it's the Dylan Penn song that was on Music from Big Pink. And yeah, Dylan sings the first verse of it, and then Richard Manuel sings the second verse. And me and my friend have talked about this too, that like the one thing that like bothers me, I guess, is even though they do focus, like the camera work isn't so much the best, even though I get that Scorsese was trying to focus on just the band and on the audience, but in some ways the camera shots can get boring once in a while, and they don't always show as much close-ups as they should on some of the members, even when, let's say, like their music in their like kind of instrument isn't as big of a factor of it, I feel, or big of an impact in that type of song on the performance. I feel like you should still see them to like kind of shake up the camera shots every now and then. But the thing me and my friend talk about is what was a real rivalry was how you do not have a close up of Richard Manuel when he's saying "I shall be released," and since that second verse, because everybody in the comments like you don't like because you see Dylan like just singing that. So and they got a good shot of Dylan, and then when they do do the chorus, they have close-ups of Dylan sharing the mic with Van Morrison and Robbie Robertson, even though, like I said again, Robbie Robertson wasn't singing, and then close-ups of even Ringo, because Ringo played with them on that performance, and Ronnie Wood as well was playing guitar on that. So you see close-ups of like Clapton and Paul Butterfield on a mic together. Same with Rick Danko, and Rick Danko and Joni Mitchell, Dr. John Neil Diamond, and then but then once they go into the second verse, they kind of do this weird wide shot and you don't know who's singing, and you kind of can see that like the camera, I guess, maybe didn't know at first they were going to Richard, because even Robbie looks at them and the cameras are decide, we got to go all the way to the other direction, because that's where Richard Manning was, because he was at the far end. And because some people in the comments wonder, like, was that Clapton in the next version or the next verse or someone did? And no, it's Richard Manuel. So that's why it was such like a real ripoff and a shame and a crime that they made, that they did not like have a close up of a good shot of Richard Manuel singing that verse, because too, like, he sings a falsetto in the studio. However, in this performance, he sings in like his very low type of raspy voice, and oh my God, does he sing that well? And like, what's so cool about that too is like everybody looks at him when he's singing it, which just kind of shows you too that, like, people are really into what he's doing, and like just like he's really got this type of magic touch. And then with them keep going throughout the harmonies of the chorus, I just it works so well. And that's like a great way to end the film. And then even them talking about how like how he talks about the road was our survival, which is what Robbie Robertson said. And the road took a lot of the good ones, and he didn't want to be one of those performers. He talked about how, like, the numbers scared him, being like on the road for 20 years. That did not want he did not want that as his life, being on the road for 20 years, doing the same type of stuff. And that's why in some ways they always say it's good to strike when the iron's hot, and end on a high note. And that's what they did, even though they never played ever to listen, they never played together again after that. However, it's probably one of the best performances. It's the best performance of their career. And also, not just that, probably one of the best performances in music in general. I mean, oh my God, I wish, if anything, if I had a time machine and I had a few wishes of where I could go back into time, it would be to that concert. Oh my God. To see that was 6 hours, that concert. And it was so much that we did not actually see in the film, where there's these shots that are like, what like Library of Congress has. Nothing like, like big close-ups or cinematic as what Scorsese captured. But there is videos of the whole concert, and like album versions of songs that we didn't hear on at the performance too. But oh my God, it's just like, what the hell of a performance. It worked so well. It really did. And that's like, yeah, like it was just like, what a concert. Like, these guys were real showmen. And that's where I'm gonna leave this on. Thank you. If you haven't watched it, it'll still be out there if you didn't see it live. I wanted to do this, because it's Thanksgiving. This is a Thanksgiving type of, performance that happened. It happened on Thanksgiving, and I've been loving this movie for about a year and been watching it nonstop every now and then. Probably it's the film. It's the film that I have watched the most this year. To tell you the truth, I don't know how many times I've watched it now. Maybe over 10, probably at this point. But yeah, no. I just, I've always wanted to talk about, the band on my channel, but I felt like I want to make sure I do it in the right way, because I really am into this music, and I really got to find a way to kind of show my passion and obsessions to people, to really, because, kind of the key is, make sure you have, like, and I think Scorsese might have said it. I think this might have been for Scorsese, is the whole job of being a filmmaker. And I put this as like a content creator in general, even that I would say, that is to make the audience love your obsessions. Or I think, actually, no, I think I saw that from Springsteen, actually, is that, make the audience care for what you're obsessed about, and make that, yeah, make that important. And that's what I really wanted to do. And I wanted to do it in a good way when I'm in a good mood talking about it. So there were sometimes I felt like I should have talked about them, but I felt like, oh no, I'm gonna fuck it up. But I feel like, I had to do it on Thanksgiving because this is a performance to talk about. And what other time to talk about it then? So happy Thanksgiving, everybody. I hope everyone had a great holiday. And yeah, stay good, stay well, and love the band. And see you guys next time in the next video. And I am thankful for everybody who's watched me and liked my videos and all that. And have a good night. See you guys. Bye.